The rain drummed against my apartment window in downtown Seattle as I stared at my phone screen, the blue light casting shadows across my face. March 15th, 11:47 p.m. In 13 minutes, my 28th birthday would officially be over, and just like the previous 5 years, it would end in complete silence. I scrolled through my contacts one more time, hoping against hope that maybe, just maybe, there'd be a missed call or text from Mom, Dad, or my sister Claire. Nothing. The only birthday message I'd received was from my dentist's office reminding me about my upcoming cleaning. An automated reminder that somehow showed more consideration than my own flesh and blood. The silence from my family had become so predictable that I'd actually started a bitter little tradition. Every year on my birthday, I'd sit here in my tiny studio apartment and count the hours of silence. This year's record stood at 23 hours and 47 minutes without a single acknowledgement of my existence from the people who raised me. I picked up the framed photo on my nightstand, the last family picture we'd taken together, Christmas 2019. We all looked so normal, so happy. Mom's arm around my shoulders, Dad's proud smile, Claire and I laughing at some joke I couldn't remember anymore. Looking at it now felt like staring at strangers, people I used to know in another lifetime. "Happy birthday to me," I whispered, to my empty studio apartment, raising a glass of cheap wine in a mock toast to the silence that had become my most reliable companion. My name is Maya Chen Rodriguez, and I've been invisible to my own family for years. The hyphenated last name tells its own story. My mother's Chinese heritage mixed with my father's Mexican roots, a blend that should have made me feel doubly blessed, but instead often left me feeling like I belonged nowhere completely. It wasn't always this way, though. The invisibility, I mean. The cultural richness of my background had once been something my family celebrated. Growing up in Sacramento, birthdays were elaborate affairs that reflected both sides of my heritage. Mom would spend weeks planning themed parties that somehow managed to incorporate both cultures. Piñatas filled with fortune cookies, birthday noodles served alongside tres leches cake, red envelopes with birthday money tucked between layers of presents. Dad would take time off work, something that was almost unheard of in his construction business, and Claire would help me blow out candles on homemade cakes while our extended family from both sides gathered around our dining room table. Those memories felt like they belonged to someone else now, scenes from a movie I'd watched about a different person's life. The girl in those memories had been cherished, celebrated, made to feel special not just on her birthday, but throughout the year. That girl had parents who showed up to school plays and soccer games, who helped with homework and listened to teenage problems with patience and understanding. But that girl had also been naive enough to believe that unconditional love was truly unconditional, that family bonds were strong enough to withstand different definitions of success and happiness. She'd learned otherwise in the most painful way possible, through gradual abandonment disguised as disappointment. The shift started when I was 22, fresh out of UC Berkeley with a degree in social work and stars in my eyes about changing the world. While Claire pursued her MBA at Stanford and landed a high-paying job at a tech startup in Silicon Valley, I chose to work with homeless youth in San Francisco's Tenderloin district. The pay was barely above minimum wage, but the work filled my soul in ways that corporate success never could. That's where the first hairline cracks in our family foundation appeared. Social work? Dad had said during that last family dinner I could clearly remember, his fork pausing halfway to his mouth. "Maya, you're wasting your potential. Claire's already making 6 figures, and you're playing therapist to people who don't want help." I'd set down my own fork, my stomach churning with disappointment that had nothing to do with Mom's overcooked pot roast. They do want help, Dad. They just need someone to believe in them, someone to see past their circumstances to their potential. "Potential doesn't pay rent," he'd replied, his voice taking on that patronizing tone I'd grown to hate. "Potential doesn't build a retirement fund or buy a house in a good neighborhood." Mom had sighed heavily, the sound carrying years of accumulated frustration. "Honey, We just want you to be successful, stable. We want you to have the kind of life where you don't have to worry about money. This bleeding heart phase will pass, and then you'll understand what we mean. But it wasn't a phase. It was who I was at my core. And apparently who I was didn't fit their narrow definition of success. Their love, I realized, came with conditions. Conditions I was unwilling to meet if it meant abandoning my values. The birthday calls stopped first, like someone had simply forgotten to set an annual reminder. Then the holiday invitations became mysterious family emergencies that always seemed to resolve themselves just after the celebrations ended. Claire's engagement party? I found out through a Facebook post 3 days later. Mom's promotion celebration. At work? A neighbor mentioned it casually while I was visiting Sacramento 6 months later, assuming I'd been there. I moved to Seattle 3 years ago, hoping distance might make their hearts grow fonder. Instead, it made their neglect more obvious. No one called to ask how I was settling in. No one visited my new apartment. I could have disappeared entirely, and I'm not sure they would have noticed. My phone buzzed. For a split second, my heart leaped, but it was just a notification from Instagram showing me memories from years past. There I was, at 23, smiling at a restaurant table with my college friends who remembered when my parents didn't. I worked at the Seattle Community Center now, running programs for at-risk teenagers. The pay was still terrible, but these kids had become my chosen family. They remembered my birthday with handmade cards and inside jokes. 17-year-old Marcus had even scraped together money to buy me a coffee gift card last week. "Miss Maya," he'd said, his usual tough guy facade cracking slightly. "You always remember our birthdays and stuff. Figured someone should remember yours." The irony wasn't lost on me. These kids who'd been abandoned by their own families showed more love and consideration than my blood relatives ever did. I closed my laptop and prepared for bed, steeling myself for another year of benign neglect. Tomorrow would be just another Friday, and I'd throw myself into work like I always did. The teenagers I counseled were dealing with real problems: addiction, homelessness, abuse. My family drama seemed petty in comparison. As I brushed my teeth, I caught my reflection in the bathroom mirror. I looked tired, older than my 28 years. When had those lines appeared around my eyes? When had my smile become so forced, so practiced? I looked like someone who'd learned to expect disappointment and had gotten really good at hiding it. My grandmother, Abuela Rosa, used to say, "Mija, family isn't just blood. Family is who shows up when you need them most. Family is who celebrates your joys and shares your sorrows without keeping score." She'd been gone for 3 years now, and I missed her wisdom desperately. She was the last person in my family who truly saw me, who valued my compassion over my bank account, who understood that success couldn't be measured solely in dollars and career advancement. Even at 91, confined to a wheelchair and struggling with memory issues, Abuela had called me every week until the day she died. She'd ask about my work, about the kids I helped, about whether I was eating enough vegetables and getting enough sleep. She never asked when I was going to get a real job or settle down with someone who could provide stability. She just loved me exactly as I was. I remembered the last conversation we'd had, just 2 days before she passed. Her voice had been weak, but her spirit was still fierce. "Maya, mi amor, promise me something," she'd whispered through the phone. "Anything, Abuela. Promise me you won't let anyone make you smaller to fit their idea of who you should be. The world needs your big heart, mija. Don't let anyone convince you to shrink it," I'd promised, crying into the phone as I spoke. And I'd tried to keep that promise, even when keeping it meant accepting loneliness and rejection from the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. I crawled into bed, pulling my favorite blanket around me. A hand-knitted throw Abuela had made during her final months in the nursing home. Her arthritis had made knitting painful, but she'd insisted on finishing it for me, working on it during her physical therapy sessions and the long afternoons when no one else visited. The soft wool still smelled faintly of her lavender perfume, and the industrial detergent from the care facility, a bittersweet combination that always made me feel both comforted and deeply sad. The blanket was a beautiful pattern of interlocking, diamonds in shades of blue and green, colors she'd chosen because she remembered me mentioning how much I love the ocean. Every stitch represented hours of love and intentionality, a stark contrast to the thoughtless neglect I'd grown accustomed to from the rest of my family. As sleep began to take hold, I made the same resolution I'd made for the past 5 years. I would stop hoping for their love and focus on the people who actually wanted me in their lives. I would build my own definition of family from the people who showed up consistently, who remembered important dates, who cared about my happiness without expecting anything in return. But even as I made that familiar promise to myself, I knew that somewhere deep inside, there was still a little girl who just wanted her mommy and daddy to remember that she existed. And that little girl made it impossible to completely let go of hope, no matter how much evidence accumulated that her family had moved on without her. Little did I know that in just 2 weeks, everything would change dramatically. Not because my family suddenly remembered they loved me, but because they remembered they wanted something from me. And this time, what they wanted was bigger than holiday drama or wedding invitations. It was life-changing money that would reveal the true nature of their feelings once and for all. The phone call that would shatter my world and rebuild it in equal measure was coming. But for now, I fell asleep clutching Abuela's blanket and dreaming of birthday parties where everyone actually showed up because they wanted to celebrate the fact that I was born. The fluorescent lights in the community center's main room flickered as I organized art supplies for the afternoon teen workshop, the familiar buzz and flicker a soundtrack to my daily routine. It was a typical Tuesday morning in late March, Seattle's perpetual drizzle creating a steady soundtrack against the tall windows that lined the east wall. The building was old, a converted elementary school from the 1960s, with that institutional smell of floor wax and industrial cleaning supplies that somehow managed to be both depressing and comforting at the same time. I was focused on separating paintbrushes by size and checking that we had enough canvas boards for the 12 teenagers expected for today's session when my phone rang. The sound echoed in the empty room, bouncing off the cinder block walls painted in an optimistic shade of yellow that someone had probably thought would be cheerful, but instead looked like cafeteria mustard. The caller ID made me freeze. Mom Mobile, I stared at the screen for 3 rings, my heart hammering against my ribs like it was trying to escape my chest. We hadn't spoken in 8 months, not since I'd called to tell them about my promotion to program director. A conversation that had lasted exactly 4 minutes and consisted mainly of, "That's nice, honey," and "We're very busy with Claire's wedding." Planning. I'd hung up that day feeling smaller and more invisible than ever. My thumb hovered over the decline button. Part of me wanted to let it go to voicemail, to maintain the status quo of mutual neglect that had become our family's default setting. But curiosity won out over self-preservation. "Hello?" I answered cautiously. "Maya." "Sweetheart." Mom's voice was unusually animated, practically singing through the phone. "How are you, baby girl?" Baby girl. She hadn't called me that since I was 15. "I'm fine. Working." "How are you, Mom?" "Oh, we're wonderful. Just wonderful." "Listen, honey, I have some incredible news. You might want to sit down for this." I remained standing, suspicion creeping up my spine like ice water. "What kind of news?" "It's about Abuela Rosa's estate. You remember Mr. Henderson, her lawyer? Well, he finally finished going through all her paperwork, and Maya..." She paused dramatically. "She left you something significant." My chest tightened, with a familiar mix of hope and dread. "What do you mean?" "A trust fund, sweetheart. A substantial one." Apparently, she'd been setting it aside for years, secretly adding to it whenever she had extra money from her pension or those little investments she made, with compound interest and some surprisingly savvy stock picks. "Maya, you're looking at over $2 million. The paintbrush I'd been holding clattered to the floor, the sound unnaturally loud in the empty room. 2 million? My legs felt weak, and I sank into one of the plastic chairs we used for group sessions. $2 million. The number was so large it felt abstract, like Monopoly money or a lottery jackpot you see on TV but never imagine applying to your own life. Isn't it amazing? Mom's voice continued, practically vibrating with excitement. She always said you were special, that you had her heart for helping others. Mr. Henderson said she specifically wanted the money to go to you because, and I quote, "Maya understands that true wealth comes from lifting others up." Those were her exact words, honey. Even the lawyer got a little emotional reading that part. My vision blurred as tears I didn't expect began forming. Even in death, Abuela had seen me, had valued who I was, had understood that my work wasn't a phase or a waste of potential, but a calling. The woman who had supported my dreams when everyone else questioned them had left me the means to pursue them on a scale I'd never imagined possible. "Are you there, sweetheart?" Mom's voice seemed to come from very far away. "Yeah, I'm here. This is incredible. I can't believe she did this." "Well, believe it. The paperwork will take a few weeks to process. You know how these legal things are, lots of red tape and signatures. But Maya, this changes everything. You can quit that little job and really make something of yourself now. Maybe go back to school, get an MBA like Claire did, or start your own business. The possibilities are endless." "The paperwork will take a few weeks to process," Mom continued, her voice now honey-sweet. "But Maya, this changes everything. You can quit that little job and really make something of yourself now. Maybe go back to school, get an MBA like Claire did, or start your own business." "Little job?" The words came out sharper than I intended. "Oh, you know what I mean, sweetheart. This community work is admirable, but now you can think bigger. Speaking of which, we absolutely must celebrate. Why don't you come home this weekend? I'll make your favorite dinner. Remember how you used to love my enchiladas?" She remembered my favorite dinner. After years of forgetting my existence, she suddenly remembered my favorite dinner. I need to process this, Mom." Of course. This is overwhelming. But Maya, I want you to know how proud we are of you. How proud we've always been. I know we haven't been the best at staying in touch, but you've always been in our hearts. My laugh came out hollow. "Really?" "Absolutely. In fact, your father and I were just talking about how we need to do better about family time. Life gets so busy, you know? But this is a sign that we need to prioritize what matters most." "What matters most?" "Right. I should go, Mom. I have a workshop starting soon." "Of course, but promise me you'll think about coming home this weekend. Claire is dying to see you, and your father has so much he wants to discuss with you. Financial planning, investment strategies. He's been researching the best wealth management firms in California." I'll think about it." "Perfect. I love you so much, Maya. We all do. I'll call you tonight to check in, okay?" The line went dead, leaving me standing in the empty community center room, staring at my phone like it might explode. $2 million. Abuela Rosa had left me $2 million, and suddenly my family remembered I existed. "Miss Maya?" Marcus's voice broke through my stupor. He stood in the doorway, his backpack slung over one shoulder, looking concerned. "You okay? You look like you've seen a ghost or something." I forced a smile. "Just unexpected news. Good news. Actually, yeah. That's cool. My mom always says good news don't come around enough, so we gotta celebrate when it does." His mom. Marcus lived with his grandmother because his mother was in and out of rehab, struggling with addiction. But even in her worst moments, she never forgot he existed. She might miss birthdays due to being in treatment, but she never pretended he wasn't her son. "Marcus, can I ask you something?" Sure, Miss Maya. If someone only paid attention to you when they wanted something from you, would you consider that love? He frowned, his young face serious. Nah, that ain't love. That's just using people. My uncle's like that. Only comes around when he needs money or a place to crash. Real love don't have conditions, you know. Out of the mouths of babes. Yeah, I said softly. I know. The rest of the day passed in a blur. During the art workshop, while helping teenagers paint their emotions onto canvas, I couldn't shake the feeling that my world had tilted off its axis. Every few hours, my phone would buzz with another family member suddenly remembering my phone number. Claire texted, "OMG Maya, Mom told me the news. We have to celebrate. When are you coming home?" Dad called during lunch. "Maya, sweetheart, congratulations. This is wonderful news. I've already contacted my financial advisor. We should set up a meeting as soon as possible. You'll want to be smart about this money." Even my cousin Jennifer, who I hadn't heard from in 3 years, sent a Facebook message. "Heard about your good fortune. So happy for you, cuz. We should catch up soon. I have some amazing investment opportunities I'd love to share with you." By evening, I had 17 missed calls and 43 text messages from family members who'd had my number all along but had somehow forgotten how to use it until today. I sat in my apartment that night, Abuela's blanket wrapped around me, staring at my phone. Part of me wanted to believe that maybe this windfall had simply reminded them how much they missed me. Maybe money was just the catalyst, and their love was real. But Marcus's words echoed in my mind. Real love don't have conditions. I thought about Abuela Rosa, who had called me every week until the day she died, who sent care packages when I was struggling in college, who never once asked what I could do for her, only what she could do for me. And I thought about the teenagers I worked with, who had been genuinely excited about my good news without wondering how it might benefit them. My phone rang again. Mom, for the 3rd time that day. "Maya, I've been thinking, and I have the most wonderful idea. What if we plan a big family reunion? It's been too long since we've all been together, and this is the perfect reason to celebrate. Mom, can I ask you something? Anything, sweetheart? When was the last time you called me just to see how I was doing?" A pause. "Well, Maya, you know how busy things get, but that doesn't mean we don't think about you constantly. Do you know what I do for work? Of course. You work with people, helping people. Do you know where I live? My address?" Another pause. Longer this time. "Maya, what's this about? We're family. These details don't matter when there's love." But they did matter. They mattered because love was in the details, in remembered birthdays and check-in calls and knowing someone's address in case of emergencies. "I need to go, Mom." "Wait, about this weekend?" I hung up and turned off my phone. Sitting in the silence of my apartment, I realized that for the first time in years, I held power in this relationship. They wanted something from me now, and that gave me leverage I'd never had before. The question was, what was I going to do with it? The Sacramento heat hit me like a wall as I stepped out of the rental car, the familiar scent of jasmine and exhaust, fumes filling my nostrils. The temperature difference from Seattle's perpetual coolness was jarring. It had to be at least 85 degrees, and it wasn't even noon yet. I stood in the driveway of my childhood home, a modest 2-story house in the suburbs, and marveled at how small it looked now compared to my childhood memories when it had seemed like a mansion. The same cracked driveway stretched before me, the one where Claire and I had drawn hopscotch courts with sidewalk chalk every summer. The same struggling rose bushes lined the front walkway, bushes that Mom never quite managed to keep alive despite multiple trips to the garden center each spring. The same peeling paint adorned the front door that Dad had been promising to fix for a decade, claiming every year that next weekend he'd get around to it. But something was different. The lawn was perfectly manicured, each blade of grass seemingly trimmed to regulation height with the precision of a golf course green. There were new flowers in the front beds, bright marigolds and petunias arranged in neat, geometric rows that looked professionally planned. Someone had pressure washed the driveway until it gleamed like new concrete, erasing years of oil stains and general wear. Even the rose bushes looked healthier, their blooms full and vibrant in a way I'd never seen them before. The front porch had been swept and scrubbed, with new welcome mats and decorative planters flanking the doorway. The windows sparkled in the afternoon sun, clearly having been professionally cleaned recently. Even the mailbox had been polished to a shine and surrounded by a small garden of decorative stones. The whole house looked like it was auditioning for a home improvement magazine, which was bizarre because my parents had never been particularly concerned with curb appeal. Dad mowed the lawn when it got embarrassingly long and neighbors started giving pointed looks, and Mom planted the occasional flower when the mood struck her, and she felt guilty about the bare patches in the garden. Beds. But this level of pristine maintenance was completely out of character. I checked my phone to make sure I had the right address, even though I'd lived here for 18 years. This was definitely my childhood home, but it looked like someone had hired a professional landscaping crew and a team of house cleaners to transform it overnight. The transformation was so dramatic that for a moment, I wondered if my parents had sold the house and new owners had moved in without telling me. As I walked up the front walkway, I noticed even more changes. The doorbell had been replaced with a newer model, the house numbers were freshly painted, and there were new outdoor light fixtures that looked like they'd come from an upscale home decor store rather than the discount hardware store, where my dad usually shopped. Everything about the exterior screamed, "We care about appearances now," in a way that felt both impressive and deeply suspicious. This wasn't the gradual improvement of homeowners who decided to take better care of their property over time. This was the frantic preparation of people who wanted to make the best possible impression on someone important. I checked my phone to make sure I had the right address, even though I'd lived here for 18 years. This was definitely my childhood home, but it looked like someone had hired a professional landscaping crew to transform it overnight. "Maya!" The front door burst open before I could even reach for the bell. Mom rushed out, her arms wide, wearing a floral dress I'd never seen before. "Oh, sweetheart, you look wonderful. Doesn't she look wonderful, Robert?" Dad appeared in the doorway, his usual weekend attire of old jeans and a stained t-shirt replaced by khakis and a button-down shirt. "She sure does. Come here, kiddo." His hug lasted longer than any physical contact we'd had in years, and I caught a whiff of expensive cologne. Dad never wore cologne. "We're so excited you decided to come home," Mom gushed, linking her arm through mine as we walked toward the house. "I've been cooking all morning, made all your favorites, enchiladas, Spanish rice, those little cinnamon cookies you used to love." She had been cooking all morning. The woman who hadn't made a homemade meal in years, who lived on takeout and microwave dinners, had spent her morning cooking my favorite foods. The inside of the house was just as surprisingly pristine. The living room had been vacuumed within an inch of its life. Fresh flowers sat on the coffee table, and I could smell pine-scented cleaner mixed with the aroma of genuine home cooking. "Claire should be here any minute," Mom said, bustling around, unnecessarily fluffing already perfect pillows. "She's bringing Derek, of course. You'll love him, Maya. He's perfect for her. Successful, stable, comes from a good family." "I'm sure he is," I replied, settling onto the couch that had been reupholstered. "Since my last visit, this place looks great, Mom. Did you redecorate?" "Oh, just a few touch-ups here and there. We've been meaning to spruce things up for ages." "Haven't we, Robert?" Dad nodded enthusiastically. "Your mother's been on a real homemaking kick lately. Says it's important to make the house feel welcoming for family." Family. Right. The front door chimed with Claire's distinctive knock, 3 quick raps followed by 2 slow ones, a pattern she'd established as a teenager. Mom practically sprinted to answer it. "Claire! Derek! Come in, come in!" My sister appeared, in the living room doorway, and I had to do a double take. Claire had always been beautiful, but she looked like she'd stepped off a magazine cover. Her honey blonde hair was styled in perfect beach waves, her makeup was flawless, and her outfit, a designer blouse paired with tailored jeans, probably cost more than I made in a month. Behind her stood Derek, looking exactly like the type of man my parents would approve of, tall, conventionally handsome, with the kind of confident smile that suggested he'd never faced a day of real hardship in his life. Maya. Claire rushed over and enveloped me in a hug that smelled like expensive perfume and professional hair products. Oh my God, I've missed you so much. You look amazing. Doesn't she look amazing, Derek? Derek stepped forward with an extended hand and a practiced smile. Maya, I've heard so much about you. Claire talks about her little sister all the time. Little sister. I was only 2 years younger than Claire, but somehow I'd been permanently relegated to that role. It's nice to meet you, Derek. Likewise, and congratulations on your good fortune. What an incredible blessing. There it was. Not even 30 seconds, and we were already talking about the money. Dinner's ready, Mom announced with the enthusiasm of a game show host. Everyone to the dining room. The dining room table was set with the good china, plates that usually only emerged during Christmas or when Mom's book club came over. Candles flickered in the center, surrounded by the feast Mom had apparently spent all morning preparing. As we settled into our seats, I noticed Claire and Derek exchange a meaningful glance. Dad cleared his throat in the way he always did when he was about to make an announcement. Maya, before we eat, I want to say something. He stood up, raising his water glass. We've been terrible at staying in touch. Life gets busy. People grow apart. But family is forever. And sometimes it takes something special, like Abuela Rosa's incredible gift, to remind us of what really matters. Everyone raised their glasses. I lifted mine automatically, but my stomach was churning. To Maya, Dad continued, and to second chances, we love you, sweetheart. To Maya, they chorused, clinking glasses. As we began eating, the conversation flowed with an artificial ease that made my skin crawl. They asked about Seattle, about my work, about my apartment, all questions they could have asked at any point over the past 3 years but hadn't bothered to. So, Maya, Derek said, cutting his enchilada with surgical precision. Claire tells me you work in social services. That's really admirable. I run youth programs at a community center, I clarified, working with at-risk teenagers. That's wonderful, Mom chimed in. Such important work, though I imagine the pay isn't great. It's enough. Well, not anymore. Claire laughed, reaching over to squeeze my hand. $2 million, Maya. Can you even imagine? You could do anything now. Travel the world, buy a house, start your own nonprofit if you really want to keep helping people. Or make some smart investments, Dad added, his eyes lighting up. I've been doing research, and there are some incredible opportunities right now. Real estate, tech stocks, cryptocurrency. Cryptocurrency? I raised an eyebrow. Since when do you know about cryptocurrency, Dad? He shifted slightly. Well, I've been learning. Reading articles, watching YouTube videos. It's never too late to expand your knowledge, right? And with your inheritance, you'll want to be smart about growing that wealth. Actually, Derek interjected, I work in financial planning, and I'd be happy to give you some advice. Pro bono, of course. Family rates. Family rates. From a man I'd met 20 minutes ago. That's so generous of you, Derek, Mom gushed. Maya, isn't that wonderful? Having someone you can trust to help with such important decisions. Trust. I almost choked on my rice. Speaking of trust, Claire said, her voice taking on a slightly different tone. I've been thinking about our future, Derek's and mine, and how amazing it would be to have family support for our dreams. Here we go. What kind of dreams? I asked, though I suspected I already knew. Claire's eyes lit up with practiced enthusiasm. Well, Derek and I have been talking about starting our own company, a consulting firm that helps small businesses optimize their operations. We have the expertise, the connections, the business plan. We just need startup capital. How much startup capital? Nothing crazy, Derek said quickly. Maybe 300,000 or 400,000 to get off the ground properly. Office space, equipment, marketing, staff salaries for the first year while we build our client base. $300,000 or $400,000. They wanted me to fund their business with money I'd inherited less than a week ago. And Maya, Claire continued, reaching for my hand again. I can't think of anyone I'd rather go into business with than my sister. You could be a silent partner, no day-to-day responsibilities, just share in the profits as we grow. A silent partner, I repeated. Exactly. You trust us to handle the business side, and you get to enjoy the returns while continuing your community work. It's perfect. Dad leaned forward eagerly. It really is a smart move, Maya. Instead of letting that money sit in some low-interest account, you could be generating real wealth, building generational prosperity. Generational prosperity. From the man who'd called my career choice a waste of potential. And it would be so wonderful to work together as a family, Mom added, her voice warm with fake sentiment. Claire and Derek handling the business, you as the investor, all of us supporting each other. It's what family does. I looked around. The table at their expectant faces, Mom's theatrical warmth, Dad's barely contained excitement, Claire's practiced enthusiasm, Derek's calculated charm. They all wore the same expression, anticipation mixed with certainty that I'd say yes. These people who had forgotten my birthday for 5 consecutive years now wanted me to bankroll their entrepreneurial dreams. It sounds like you've given this a lot of thought, I said carefully. We have, Claire exclaimed. I actually brought some preliminary paperwork, just in case you were interested. Derek's lawyer friend drew up some basic partnership agreements. Nothing. Binding, of course, just to show you how serious we are about making this work. She reached into her purse and pulled out a manila folder thick with documents. They'd brought contracts to my welcome home dinner. This is really something, I said, flipping through the papers without really reading them. You've thought of everything. We just want to make sure you know this isn't some fly-by-night scheme, Derek said earnestly. This is a legitimate business opportunity with enormous potential. We're talking about being set for life, Maya. All of us. All of us. Except they weren't contributing anything except their expertise and my money. I'm curious about something, I said, setting the folder aside. When did you come up with this business idea? Claire and Derek exchanged another look. We've been discussing it for months, Claire said. Haven't we, honey? Absolutely. Months and months. Interesting. Because when I called to congratulate you on your engagement 8 months ago, you told me you loved your job at the marketing firm and couldn't imagine doing anything else. Claire's smile flickered. Well, people change, Maya. Dreams evolve. And... Derek, what did you say you do again? Financial planning, he replied smoothly. I help people make smart decisions with their money. At which firm? It's a smaller company. You probably haven't heard of it. I smiled and took another bite of enchilada. These are delicious, Mom. Just like I remembered. The conversation moved on to safer topics. Claire's wedding plans, Dad's golf game, Mom's book club. But I could feel the undercurrent of tension. They'd made their pitch, and now they were waiting for my response. After dinner, as Mom busied herself with clearing dishes despite my offers to help, Claire cornered me in the living room. Maya, I hope you know how much this opportunity means to Derek and me. And not just financially, emotionally. The chance to work together, to build something as a family. Where was this family feeling when I moved to Seattle? The question slipped out before I could stop it. Claire's expression faltered. What do you mean? I mean, none of you bothered to help me move, or visit, or even call to see how I was adjusting. But now you want to build something together as a family? Maya, that's not fair. You know how busy everyone gets. Do I? Because the teenagers I work with are busy too. They have jobs, school, family drama, real problems, but they still remember to ask how I'm doing. Claire's perfectly made-up face crumpled slightly. Are you saying we don't care about you? The honest answer would have destroyed her, so I chose a gentler approach. I'm saying caring isn't something you turn on when it's convenient. Before Claire could respond, Dad appeared with Derek, both of them carrying cups of coffee and wearing expressions of barely contained excitement. Maya, we've been talking, Dad said, settling into his recliner. And we think there might be another opportunity you'd be interested in hearing about. Another opportunity. Of course there was. My golf buddy Jim runs a real estate development company, Dad continued. They're looking for investors on a new shopping complex in Folsom. Guaranteed returns, minimal risk, and Jim would give us a family discount on the investment minimum. How much is the minimum? Only $500,000. But Maya, this is the kind of investment that could double your money in 2 years. Only $500,000. Dad was talking about half my inheritance like it was pocket change. And here's the beautiful part, Derek added. You could invest in both opportunities, the business and the real estate. Diversify your portfolio right from the start. Both opportunities. They wanted me to give them nearly $1 million based on conversations they'd had in the span of a week. I appreciate all the advice, I said, standing up. But I think I need some time to process everything. Of course, Mom called from the kitchen. These are big decisions. But Maya, just remember, family investments are the safest investments. We're all looking out for each other. Looking out for each other. Right. As I drove back to my hotel that night, I couldn't shake the image of their faces around that dinner table. The same people who had been too busy to call me for years had suddenly found time to research investment opportunities, draw up business plans, and cook elaborate meals. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Hope you're having fun. With your family, Miss Maya. Don't let nobody treat you like you ain't worth their time, even if they blood. Even a 17-year-old kid could see what my own family refused to acknowledge. That their sudden attention wasn't love. It was opportunity. I had one more day in Sacramento before flying back to Seattle. One more day to decide how I wanted to handle this situation. But deep down, I already knew what I was going to do. The next morning, I woke up in my hotel room with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. The Sacramento sun streamed through the thin curtains, and I could hear the familiar sounds of traffic and suburban life stirring outside. I'd spent half the night staring at the ceiling, replaying dinner conversations and childhood memories, trying to reconcile the family I'd once loved with the people I'd sat across from yesterday. I called the community center to check on things, and Janet, my assistant, director, answered on the first ring. Maya, how's the family reunion going? Enlightening, I said. How are the kids? Missing you already. Marcus asked 3 times yesterday if you'd called. That boy worries about you like you're his big sister. Marcus, 17 years old, abandoned by his father, struggling with a mother in recovery, and he worried about me. Tell him I'm fine and I'll see him Monday. Any issues I need to know about? Nothing we can't handle. Oh, but Maya? That reporter from the Seattle Times called again about the feature story on the youth programs. She wants to schedule an interview when you get back. Sounds good. I'll call her Monday. After hanging up, I sat on the edge of the hotel bed and made a decision. I wasn't going to let this charade continue for another day. If my family wanted to play games, they were about to learn that I'd gotten pretty good at spotting manipulation over the years. I drove to my parents' house around 10, using the key I'd had since high school. The house was quiet. Too quiet. For a Saturday morning. I found Mom in the kitchen, dressed in another outfit I'd never seen, arranging flowers in a vase. Maya, you're early, sweetheart. I was just making breakfast. Pancakes from scratch, just like when you were little. She'd never made pancakes from scratch in my entire childhood. We'd always used the box mix from Costco. Actually, Mom, I wanted to talk to you and Dad before Claire gets here. Her smile faltered slightly. Of course, baby. Let me get your father. Dad appeared in his weekend khakis and cologne, coffee mug in hand. Maya, ready for another day of family time? Actually, I have some questions about yesterday. They settled across from me at the kitchen table, wearing identical expressions of forced cheerfulness. Dad, you mentioned that you've been researching investment opportunities for me. When did you start doing that research? Well, after we heard about the inheritance, naturally. I wanted to be prepared to help you make smart decisions. So you started researching after Mom called me on Tuesday? Yes, I suppose so. And Derek's business proposal. Claire said they've been discussing it for months, but she also said she brought partnership paperwork to dinner. How long does it typically take to draw up partnership agreements? Dad shifted uncomfortably. I wouldn't know, sweetheart. That's not my area of expertise. Mom, I turned to her. You said yesterday that you and Dad have been talking about doing better with family time. When did those conversations start? Well, Maya, what's this about? We're trying to be closer as a family. Isn't that what you've always wanted? What I've always wanted, I said quietly, was for you to remember I existed when I wasn't useful to you. The artificial cheer drained from their faces. Maya, that's not fair, Dad said. We've always loved you. Have you? Because love isn't a feeling you turn on when it's convenient. Love is showing up. Love is remembering birthdays. Love is calling to check if your daughter is okay when she moves to a new city. Mom's eyes filled with tears that looked genuine for the first time since I'd arrived. Maya, we know we haven't been perfect. Perfect? Mom, you didn't even know where I lived until this week. When was the last time any of you called me just to see how I was doing? Silence. I'll tell you when. Never. Not once in 3 years. Have any of you called just to talk? But within 24 hours of hearing about an inheritance, suddenly I'm sweetheart and baby girl, and you're cooking my favorite foods. We were shocked by the news, Dad said weakly. It made us realize how much we'd been taking you for granted. No, Dad. It made you realize I might be useful to you now. The front door opened with Claire's distinctive knock pattern, followed by her voice calling out, "Morning, family." She bounced into the kitchen wearing designer workout clothes and another bright smile, Derek close behind in tennis whites. Maya, I was hoping you'd be here early. Derek and I were up half the night talking about the business, and we had some additional thoughts about the partnership structure. She stopped mid-sentence, reading the tension in the room. What's going on? I was just asking Mom and Dad about the timeline of their sudden interest in my well-being. Claire's smile became more forced. Maya, we've always been interested in your well-being. Really? Then why didn't any of you know I was promoted to program director 6 months ago? You were promoted? Mom asked. See? You didn't know because you didn't ask. You called to talk about Claire's wedding, but you never asked about my life. Derek cleared his throat. Maya, I think there might be some misunderstanding here. No misunderstanding, Derek, just clarity. Claire, can I ask you something? Of course. This business idea you and Derek have been developing for months, what's it called? Claire and Derek exchanged their now familiar look of panic. We haven't settled on a name yet, she said. What kind of consulting exactly? Business operations optimization, Derek said quickly. Which operations, specifically? Another pause. It's comprehensive. We help businesses streamline their processes across multiple departments. I smiled. That's interesting, because I spent some time last night researching business consulting firms. And that's exactly the kind of vague description someone would give if they hadn't actually developed a business plan. Maya, what are you implying? Claire's voice had lost its artificial sweetness. I'm not implying anything. I'm stating it directly. You made this up after hearing about the inheritance. That's ridiculous. Is it? Because I also looked up Derek's financial planning firm. I pulled out my phone and read from the screen. Morrison Financial Services, which according to the Better Business Bureau, closed permanently in January due to the owner's retirement. So either Derek works for a company that doesn't exist, or his credentials are as fabricated as your business plan. Derek's face went white. Maya, I can explain. Can you? Because I also called the Sacramento County Business Licensing Office this morning. There's no record of Derek Morrison being licensed as a financial advisor in California. The kitchen fell silent, except for the ticking of the wall clock and Mom's quiet sniffling. You want to know what really happened here? I continued. You heard I inherited money, and within days you all scrambled to figure out how to get your hands on it. Dad started Googling investment opportunities. Claire and Derek invented a business proposal. Mom started playing the loving mother she hasn't been in years. And all of you convinced yourselves that this sudden attention was somehow genuine. Claire's composure finally cracked. Fine. Yes, we heard about the money and thought maybe we could all benefit from it. Is that such a crime? We're family. Are we? I stood up from the table. Because family doesn't disappear for years and then reappear with their hands out. Family doesn't forget birthdays and then suddenly remember your favorite foods when you're useful to them. Maya, please, Mom said through her tears. We made mistakes, but we can fix this. We can be the family you deserve. Now? After I have money? Where was this motivation for the past 5 years? Dad finally found his voice. We were wrong, Maya. We were selfish and wrong. But people can change. Families can heal. You're right, Dad. People can change. And I have changed. I've learned to value the people who show up consistently, not just when it benefits them. I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app, turning the screen toward them. You want to know something interesting about Abuela's trust fund? The money isn't actually available yet. The estate is still in probate, and according to Mr. Henderson, it could be 6 months before I see a penny. Their faces went through a fascinating range of emotions. Confusion, then understanding, then something approaching horror. You've been planning to take my money before I even have access to it, I continued. You've been treating me like your personal ATM based on the possibility of future wealth. Maya, we just wanted to help, Claire started. Help? You wanted to help yourselves. There's a difference. Derek, who had been silent since being exposed, finally spoke up. Look, maybe we got carried away with the business stuff, but that doesn't mean the family feelings aren't real. Doesn't it? Derek, you've met me exactly twice, and both times you've tried to get me to invest in something. That's not family. Feelings. That's sales tactics. I walked toward the living room, and they followed like guilty children. I want to tell you about my real family, I said, settling onto the couch. Marcus is 17. His mom is in recovery, his dad is nowhere to be found, and he lives with his grandmother in a 1-bedroom apartment. Last month, he saved up $20 from his part-time job to buy me a coffee gift card for my birthday. $20 that he needed for bus fare and lunch money, but he spent it on me because he wanted to make sure someone celebrated the day I was born. Mom was crying openly now. Maya, we forgot your birthday, but not just this year, Mom, 5 years in a row. But Marcus, who has nothing, remembers. Shayla is 16 and pregnant, kicked out by her parents for getting involved with the wrong guy. She asks about my weekend plans because she cares how I spend my free time. Damon is 15 and hasn't seen his parents in 2 years. He brings me drawings he makes in detention because he knows they make me smile. I paused, letting that sink in. These kids, who've been abandoned and neglected and forgotten by the people who were supposed to love them, show me more genuine care in a week than you've shown me in years. They don't want anything from me except the knowledge that someone believes in them. Claire sat down across from me, mascara streaking down her cheeks. Maya, I know we've been awful, but we can fix this. We can be better. Can you? Because this isn't just about the money, Claire. This is about fundamental character. When you heard I might be wealthy, your first thought wasn't, I'm so happy. For my sister. It was, how can this benefit me? That's not true, she protested. Isn't it? In all the conversations we've had since Tuesday, how many times have you asked about my happiness? How many times have you asked if I'm okay, if I'm lonely, if I need emotional support? Every single conversation has been about what I can do for you. The room fell quiet, except for the sound of Mom's sniffling and the distant hum of traffic outside. I want to read you something, I said, pulling out my phone again. This is a text I got from Marcus yesterday. Hope you're having fun with your family, Miss Maya. Don't let nobody treat you like you ain't worth their time. Even if they blood. I looked up at their faces. A 17-year-old kid with no stable family of his own understands something that you don't. That blood relation doesn't automatically equal love, and love doesn't come with conditions. Dad leaned forward in his chair. Maya, what do you want from us? How can we make this right? I want you to understand that love isn't something you can turn on when it's convenient. I want you to recognize that for years, you treated me like I was disposable, and I want you to acknowledge that your sudden interest in my life isn't about missing me. It's about what you think I can give you. So what happens now? Claire asked quietly. I stood up and grabbed my purse. Now I go back to Seattle, to the people who love me without conditions. I work with kids who understand loyalty and sacrifice better than their own families ever did. And I use Abuela's gift to honor her memory by helping people who actually need it. Are you saying you'll never speak to us again? Mom asked. I'm saying that if you want a relationship with me, it has to be based on genuine love, not financial opportunity. It has to involve showing up when things are hard, not just when they're profitable. It has to include remembering important dates and asking about my life because you actually care about the answers. I paused at the front door. The teenagers I work with call that showing up. It's not complicated, but it does require consistency. Something you've never been willing to give me. Maya, wait, Dad called out. Can we try again? Start over? Dad, you can't start over a relationship by pretending the past didn't happen. You can only move forward by acknowledging what went wrong and making genuine changes. We want to do that, Claire said desperately. We want to change. Then prove it. Not with words, but with actions. Not when you want something from me, but when you don't. Not just for a few weeks until this conversation is forgotten, but consistently, for years. I opened the front door and stepped into the California sunshine. But understand this, I said, turning back to look at them one final time. I'm not waiting around hoping you'll remember I exist. I've built a life with people who value me for who I am, not what I have. If you want to be part of that life, you'll have to earn your way back in. As I drove away from the house, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Complete clarity about my worth and my relationships. My phone rang as I reached the freeway. Marcus. Miss Maya, how'd it go with your family? It went exactly how it needed to go, I said. How are things at the center? Good. Listen, a bunch of us are planning a surprise party for Shayla's baby shower next week. Can you help us figure out what pregnant ladies need? I smiled, feeling the weight of the past few days lifting from my shoulders. Absolutely. I'll be back tomorrow, and we'll plan the best baby shower Shayla's ever seen. You're the best, Miss Maya. For real. As I drove toward the airport, I thought about Abuela Rosa and her final gift to me. She'd always said that true wealth came from lifting others up, and I finally understood what she meant. The money would help, But the real inheritance she'd left me was the understanding that family isn't about blood. It's about showing up. And I knew exactly who had been showing up for me all along. 6 months later, the Seattle Community Center was buzzing with activity as I put the finishing touches on the new computer lab, the sound of productive chaos filling the converted classroom. Keyboards clicked, printers hummed, and teenagers chatted excitedly about their college application, essays, and scholarship opportunities. The trust fund had finally cleared probate after months of legal paperwork and bureaucratic delays, and I'd used a significant portion of it to expand our programs dramatically. The transformation had been incredible to witness. New equipment lined the walls, 20 state-of-the-art computers, 2 high-quality printers, a smartboard for presentations, and enough software licenses to give these kids access to the same tools their wealthier peers took for granted. We'd hired additional staff, created new programs, and established a scholarship fund that would send dozens of kids to college every year. But the computers were just the beginning. We'd also opened a small kitchen where kids could learn cooking, skills, and get nutritious meals, a quiet study room with tutoring support, and a counseling office where they could talk through problems with licensed therapists. The whole center hummed with possibility now, every corner designed to help these forgotten kids see their own potential. "Miss Maya." Marcus bounded into the room, wearing his cap and gown from his graduation ceremony the week before. The sight of him in those academic regalia never failed to make me emotional. This kid who'd been written off by teachers, dismissed by relatives, and ignored by a system that should have protected him. He'd not only graduated high school but done so with honors, earning admission to 3 different colleges. Look what came in the mail. He waved an envelope excitedly, his grin so wide it looked like it might split his face in half. I opened it carefully, though his excitement had already told me what I'd find inside. It was a letter from the University of Washington's social work program, printed on official letterhead with gold embossing at the top. "Dear Mr. Johnson," I read aloud, "we are pleased to inform you that your application for transfer admission to the University of Washington School of Social Work has been accepted for the fall 2025 semester. Your academic achievements, personal, statement, and community service record have impressed our admissions committee. Marcus, this is incredible. I'm so proud of you." I pulled him into a hug, remembering the scared, angry kid who'd walked into our center 2 years ago, convinced that no one would ever believe in him again. "Couldn't have done it without you believing in me first," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "When I walked in here, I thought I was just another statistic, another throwaway kid nobody cared about. You saw something in me that I couldn't see in myself." It was true. Marcus had been referred to us by the juvenile court system after a series of minor infractions, shoplifting, truancy, getting into fights at school. His file read like a case study in systemic failure. Absent father, mother struggling with addiction, bounced between relatives who saw him as a burden. But underneath all that anger and defiance, I'd seen a brilliant kid who just needed someone to care about his future. My mom had called several times over the past 6 months, along with Claire and Dad. The conversations had been awkward at first, stilted attempts at small talk, careful inquiries about my life that felt rehearsed and uncertain. They'd ask about Seattle, about my work, about whether I was happy, and I could hear them walking on eggshells, afraid of saying the wrong thing. "What did she say?" I asked, though I suspected I already knew. "Just that she wanted to wish you a happy birthday. Said she wanted to make sure she didn't miss it this year. She seemed real nervous about it. Kept asking if I thought you'd want to hear from her." My birthday. I'd honestly forgotten it was coming up next week. The past 6 months had been so busy with the center expansion, with watching kids like Marcus achieve their dreams, with building something meaningful with Abuela's gift, that my own birthday had completely slipped my mind. She also said something about maybe coming to visit Seattle sometime, if you'd want her to. Said she'd like to see what you do here, meet the kids you talk about. That surprised me. In all our conversations over the years, my family had never expressed any interest in visiting my life. They'd never asked to see where I worked or meet the people who mattered to me. "You gonna call her back?" Marcus asked, his expression serious. This kid had learned to read people's emotions with the precision of someone who'd had to survive by understanding adult moods. Maybe, I said honestly. We'll see. The truth was, I wasn't sure what to do with their tentative attempts at rebuilding our relationship. Part of me wanted to believe that the shock of nearly losing me completely had genuinely changed something in them. But another part of me, the part that had spent 5 years learning to protect my heart, wasn't ready to trust that the change was real. You know what I think? Marcus said, settling into one of the computer chairs and spinning it slowly. I think people can change, but only if they really want to, and only if they're willing to do the work even when it's hard. Wise words from someone so young. Nah, I just seen enough fake people to know the difference. The real ones stick around even when you got nothing to give them. The fake ones disappear when times get tough. He was right, of course. These kids had taught me more about loyalty and authentic love than any adult ever had. They'd shown up for each other through addiction relapses, family crises, academic struggles, and teenage heartbreak. They celebrated each other's victories without jealousy and supported each other through failures without judgment. Because here's what I'd learned over the past 6 months. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. Love doesn't mean accepting scraps of attention when people want something from you. And family, real family, doesn't have conditions attached. I looked around the computer lab, filled with kids who called me when they had good news to share, who remembered my birthday without prompting, who showed up not because they had to, but because they wanted to. Whether my biological family eventually earned their way back into my life remained to be seen. But I was no longer waiting for their love to feel complete. I already had all the family I needed.